We're here with Tricia Barker, and she had an amazing near-death experience in her senior year of college. Welcome, Tricia. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. It's wonderful to be on your show.
Before your NDE, you did not believe in God. Can you tell us about that and how your life was transformed?
As a child, I received a lot of religious abuse, and I think some people can understand this. My mother was very strict and definitely believed in certain things in the Bible, like, spare the rod, spoil the child. And that type of emotional and spiritual abuse made me really just hate religion. And by the time I was in seventh grade, I liked science. I was already concerned, and this is like, the 80s, about climate change. I wanted to be an environmental scientist. I loved animals. There was a part of me that was really driven by what can be proven, academia, and success in the material world. So I just collapsed religion and I thought, oh, that's for weak people, and that's for really kind of messed up people that, if they could get their lives together, they would, And I observed, my mom and dad's marriage and different people's marriages that stayed together for religion and they were miserable. And I thought, yeah, I'll never do that either. And, certain parts of the Bible that were very patriarchal. I was this bright, intelligent, like very strong willed child. And I was just dumbfounded by that, like traditional roles. I was like, no way, I'm just not a traditional woman. So the Bible itself did not appeal to me. Certain things that Jesus said were beautiful, and I kind of took some of the beauty of the Bible, but I looked at it as purely fiction. Like, and that was the end of that. And when I got to college, all I cared about was material success because I had grown up poor. And so meeting people, expanding my social circle and really just enjoying life. However, when I got there, I had been kind of emotionally drained by an abusive environment. And so I went into therapy and I realized, oh, I can't really take on the world like I thought I could. And, there was really some deep emotional healing through therapy that I had to do. And I do have to say, that drugs and alcohol as a way to cope with trauma in one's past is not the best option. And so that was having an effect on me. The 90s was a time of binge drinking and going out and partying, and that was chipping away at my great grade point average. And like by the time I was a senior, I was starting to worry about myself. Certain friends were going into rehab, and I looked around at my life and I thought, "Ooh, there's something amiss. There's something awry here." And I got more serious about health after a suicide attempt, actually, and I was certain, that I was going to run this race, and this race was a symbol of me getting my life together. And that's actually when the near-death experience happened. But that's the background. So by the time I was about to run this race, I was pretty certain, and I was afraid of death. I was pretty certain that just we don't go on, that this is the end, that the physical form is the end. So it was a 10K race. I loved to run in high school. I was in cross country, and so getting back into running, and that time period was really important for me. And I was training hard. I was down below a 5 minute mile, so I was a serious athlete at that point.
So, what can you tell us about the day you had your accident and had your near-death experience?
I've come to realize now that after talking with different astrologers, and I would not have believed in that at the time, but there were a lot of things that were conspiring to make this moment in time happen. And I was even becoming aware that something big was happening maybe a few days before my accident. I had what would be considered a frightening out of body experience. I was at a club, a comedy club, and I lifted up out of my body and I heard very loudly, "You are going to die." And I freaked out. I thought, my mindset at that time, I was like, oh dear, Now I'm losing my mind. Like this is a psychotic break, and like, and I stopped smoking weed at that point, and I was like, okay, that's the problem. Like no more. And then the night before the race, I had all these terrifying dreams, and it was like I was going down this tunnel, and both of my parents were screaming, "Watch out! Watch out!" And they were like horrified. And I woke up for the race kind of not so well rested, and I missed coffee, and I was like running, and I wasn't an early morning person because I worked in bars to pay for college. And on my way to the race, I had a massive car accident, so bad that I couldn't bend over. So basically, I was slumped against the windshield, and I couldn't grab my license and registration. Luckily, the other people were in a much larger car than me, so they were okay, and they got out of the car. A nurse came, and luckily, for me, there was a nurse, and she stayed with me and told me not to move, and told me that it looked like my neck and back may have been broken, and that I needed to just be still until they put me on a board. And at that point, I remember thinking, well, of course I'm not going to run the race, but beyond that, I was like, whoa, this is serious. This could change my life forever. Am I going to walk? Am I going to run ever again? Could I possibly die here in this moment? And it was, this was heavy. And I did contemplate, and this is about as far as I got with God. I was like, oh, I really don't believe that there's a God, but hey, if there is, help me out here, And so I did make that plea, and then the rest of the day was consumed with CAT scans and MRIs, and then eventually I went into surgery. When I went into surgery, I was taken under. And I remember signing a sheet before that said 17% chance of death. And I thought, well, I'm 21, I'm healthy. This is probably not going to happen to me. And little did I realize that it would. And so at some point during the surgery, they had most of my back open and my hip, because they were taking bone from the hip and replacing it in my back. I lifted up, my spirit form lifted up out of my body. I saw, it was like I could see 360 degrees, and I was above the surgeons, and I saw them operating on my body, which was full of blood spilling over. And I remember thinking, ooh, surgery's really bloody. This doesn't look right. This doesn't look good. But then I saw the most amazing thing. I saw angels behind my doctors, and they were about 8, 9 feet tall. Light beings is what I thought of them. They were not male or female. They just kind of had wavy long hair, somewhere in between the length of our hair, and they were made up of light. They were made up of this shimmery white, gold, blue, pink light. I don't know how to describe it because there's different colors on that other side, but I knew they were deeply intelligent and deeply healing. And they were playful in a way. They were communicating to me with this light through their eyes, but they said, hey, watch this. And then they sent this light through the back of the surgeons, through their hands, and it lit up my whole body. And I understood that they were giving the doctors the intelligence to understand where to find the bone fragments and pick them out of my spine so that I could walk, because I had actually lost feeling in one of my legs before going into surgery. And they assured me that I would walk and run again. And I got this sense that I would live. But right at that moment, the monitor flatlined. And we've all heard that from television shows. And I realized I was dead. And I saw the anesthesiologist kind of back up at that point and come around. And then I saw the surgeons, like also step back, because I knew that they had to do something to revive me. But in that moment, I thought, ooh, I can leave the hospital room. I don't have to stay here and watch them revive me. How boring would that be? What's out there? And so my soul took off. And I remember the first wall that I went through, I was like, how do you do this as a spirit form? And then I was like, oh, you just think it. So the minute you think something, you're able to do it. And so I was through the wall and into this corridor where I saw my stepdad get a candy bar. And years later, I didn't know the significance of this moment. But years later, IANS researchers love that because that's a verifiable detail outside of body. To me, I just saw him and I thought, he doesn't usually eat candy. They brag about what health nuts they are. That joker is eating candy. And so I was like, I hope he's good to my mom. I hope they're happy. And then I just got this feeling like, well, maybe I don't have to come back to that body because this is fun. I felt this expanded consciousness and it felt very real. So it wasn't like I was this wavy form of light. I was me, and it was powerful, and I was so much more intelligent outside of body. So I placed a lot of importance on my good SAT scores, on getting into a good college. And then I was like, wow, that brain is not as smart as it thinks it is, because outside of body there's a whole lot more information and a whole lot more understanding. And I was certain that this was the reality. After seeing the angels, I didn't have to have the expanded near-death experience that I had to be convinced. I knew it wasn't a dream. I knew this was an altered reality, that basically this is not the truth, that the expanded reality beyond this physical reality is the truth. And I got that immediately. Well, as I flew outside of the hospital, though, I began to get in touch with freedom and love. And those are the two combining attributes that I think are important, because a lot of times here in the world, we associate love with connection or control, or, this person must be with me. But what I felt over there was like, everything is fine exactly the way it is. You don't have to control anything. You are perfect and free exactly the way you are. And you're loved unconditionally. You're loved to the nth degree. And so I felt so happy, and I just sent love to everyone I had ever known, even a barista, who gave me coffee. I just felt like, hey, if I don't come back, have a great life. And I felt this oneness with all the people at the university, all the people in the town. And then, like, in a split second, I was somewhere out in the universe. I went down a quick tunnel, and that starscape behind you, I was in this beautiful starscape, which really looks a lot like the Carina Nebula. There were pink, stars all around me. So that would be like millions of light years away in a split second. And I'm just floating in this beautiful starscape, and I feel complete peace. And I begin to feel this light, this intelligence, which in my mind, I thought this means God. This intelligence was coming towards me and telling me certain things like, love is all we take with us when we go. It is the frequency, it's the highest frequency that can travel through this dimension, and remind them to go to nature, just and be like a little child. There were certain like simple messages that I was told. And then I was shown a life review, and it wasn't a full life review. Like, if you can imagine that starscape behind you, it was like a hologram. Certain moments were projected into the sky, and I saw that playing as a kid in nature was good. And I did this experiment as a kid, because even at about 4, I didn't believe that God was real. And so I did this experiment where I said, if you're real, God, I want to see some baby rabbits. And so I went, and I didn't even know, but I was like in the lotus position, and I closed my eyes. And so I meditated for a long time in this briar patch. And then when I opened my eyes, all these baby rabbits were playing right around me. And I was like, well, I guess you're real. So there was this cute moment in childhood where my faith was real, and I did stay connected to God, and God showed me that moment. And God showed me other moments of like being kind to others. But then he showed me, and I say he, just a light, just a loving presence. God showed me this one moment where I was becoming judgmental in superficial, kind of silly ways. That as a university student, I just wanted to be friends with people my age, and people who were at college, and people who had the same beliefs as me, that I was becoming cliquish. And I just didn't care to get to know people at work if they were older than me or religious. And I saw this couple who was Catholic, and they went home and prayed for me because they thought I was depressed. And I was like, that's the only people who really were sending me love. And yet, I was choosing all these friends who maybe didn't hold me in that same esteem and with that same honor. And oh my God, if a soul could cry, I just wanted to cry. And I was like, I'll do better. I will look into the hearts of people. I will not judge people based on, outward qualities. I will find good hearts on this earth, and I will keep an open mind. And in that moment, I just realized, oh, I'm so wrong. I'm so wrong about so many things, but I'm so loved anyway. And that's the feeling of non-judgment, is even though I was egotistical, even though, I was judgmental, I was shown deep love. And I think that's the healing for everyone, is no matter what we are doing here, we are loved, like we are loved at a very deep level. The next part of my near-death experience, and these concepts are hard to explain because I feel like there's so much more than what we experience sometimes in a near-death experience. My consciousness at that time could only handle so much. But I understood that this realm that I went to next was like just a realm, just a holding place. It wasn't the end. Some people think of heaven as the end, but I think there's so much more out there to discover. And, now I've become a medium and I talk to spirits who've gone much farther than I did. But in this realm, this holding place, heaven looked a lot like earth, but perfect. So the grass was very green. It was just almost musical. Like each blade of grass was so alive, like with emerald colors and kind of swaying in the wind. And it wasn't like normal grass that might have some brown spots or some death to it. Really, everything was alive. And my only ancestor that I knew on the other side was my grandfather, and he appeared. And at first, I didn't recognize him because he looked so young and healthy, and he had died very old of leukemia. And then here he was, like 35, and I never knew him when he was 35. But he kind of looked like a male version of me now. Yeah, so there was this beauty to him that I was like, oh, I recognize the jaw, I recognize the eyes, that's my grandfather. And he was a very loving grandfather. So my father's side of the family was very country and religious, but loving, just like salt of the earth kind of people. And I was their only grandchild. So he adored me and he wanted me to remember him. And I was happy to see him. And you don't have to speak over there. You just communicate with light, kind of the way the angels did. And so there was this deep knowing that we had between one another. And then he wanted me to have fun. And I thought, okay, if he can change his form, I'll shrink mine down to like a 5-year-old. And so I became a child in that heavenly space. And he showed me this truck. And I know a lot of people go, well, why would there be a truck in heaven? You can have anything you want in heaven. It's consciousness. You play around with it, you create it. And it was this 1960s Chevy truck, the really, or Ford, I don't even know, but it was just the bubble type of truck that was blue. And he had given it to my father, but my father never fixed it up, and it rusted in the front yard, and we did nothing with it. And that always made me sad because I thought it was a beautiful antique truck. And he wanted me to know that everything that dies here, everything that rusts here, is made new again in heaven. And you can, there is no death, there is just eternal life, even for things, which was kind of bizarre, that things can be in heaven. But I jumped on the back of the truck like I had when I was a kid, and my feet were swaying in the grass, and I felt so at peace and happy. And then he turned around at some point, and I understood this, and I understood that it was kind of a heavy moment. And it's almost like he knew that God was communicating with him, and that God said, well, she may not make it. And he turned around and he said, do you want to keep going on towards God? And I was like, yes. And then, my soul just flew towards the light. And this was my favorite part of the experience, because the pieces of love that I was feeling at different parts in this near death experience was nothing in comparison to flying towards God. I felt that every part of my soul, in any wound or slight or anything that was particularly cruel in life, was just being taken away by this love, that simply I was part of God, and I was loved so deeply. And I felt people's prayers trying to pull me back toward my body. I felt as if there was, almost like a spiritual war. I wanted to go to God. People were praying that I might stay. And I heard the actual words of their prayer. Some of my aunts didn't want my mom to lose a child. They thought that would be too harsh for her. They weren't actually concerned about me. They were just like, oh, her parents will really be destroyed, if they lose their only child. And so I was like, they'll be fine. I'll see them. I'll see you all in no time. The time loses its meaning there. And I didn't want to leave that presence of God, because nothing had felt so good. No experience on earth, nothing compares to God. And as soon as I had that thought of I'm not coming back, I felt this energetic barrier. It was almost like hitting a wall. And then I felt this booming vibration, I'll call it, but it was a voice, and it pounded through me and it said, look down. And as I looked down, I saw all these souls, and they either were connected to God, they had light, and they felt God's power, and they were happy for the most part. They were in that flow of God, or they had darkness around them. And the message was really simple: remind them to turn on their lights, remind them to be in the light. And I understood, that this didn't have to be religion. This could be, even someone could be agnostic or atheist and be passionate about their purpose. They could, be optimistic and driven. Someone could love a sport, and they're, all about their health and helping other people. That this was really about fear, depression, anger, anything that lowers our vibration. And from that vantage point, there isn't judgment. So, it wasn't like, oh, those are criminals, or those are, it was just people who are hurting. Anyone who's hurting and is blocked for whatever reason from God can find a way to open up and receive that light and that energy. And that was a simple message, but I was like, okay, how am I going to do that? And God said, well, you're going to go back and you're going to be a teacher, not a spiritual teacher, like an actual teacher in public schools and high schools and colleges. And I saw this. I was like, oh, no, that's not what I'm going to do, God. I did not sign up for this. I want to make money. Teaching is not a lucrative career, and it's too traditional. I'm not a traditional female. Forget it. And in that moment, God balled up my soul and kind of threw me back into my body. And I was like, oh, no. God has a sense of humor. I just argued with God, and I'm not that powerful. and so it was really, my consciousness was so expanded, it was hard to be back in my body. So, as I was coming out of surgery, I immediately remembered the near-death experience. I knew exactly where I was, and I found it hard to identify with just me. I felt like I was in the room and I was a part of everyone. And, it was a weird experience.
Did the doctors ever told you how long you were gone?
Yeah. So I couldn't wait to see my surgeon, because she was very cool. And as soon as she walked in, I said, hey, I died. How long was I dead? And she kind of jumped back. She was like, well, we thought we lost you for a couple of minutes, but you're fine now. You're getting some blood transfusions and your surgery was successful. You're going to walk. And I kept wanting, and I said, how did you revive me? What? And she just was like, no, I'm not talking about it. And I got this impression because I could read people's thoughts to some degree, after this experience, and I could see her. It was like she was telepathically sending me this message: don't keep talking like this or I'm going to have to prescribe medicine. It was yeah.
So, what other gifts did you bring back from your experience?
Well, the gifts in that first year were so untainted because I was so fresh from that other side. And, it was like a brand new world, a magical world. Not only was my brain clear, from not going out drinking and partying, to this expanded consciousness that I didn't even fully understand. So, after 9 days in the hospital, I went home to my mom's house. And the first thing is I still felt my angels. And, the doctor had prescribed pain pills because I'd had a major back surgery and I had steel rods in my back. And I couldn't take the pain meds. Like I would vomit them up, just the minute I took them, I felt dizzy and disoriented. And my angels were like, guess what? You're not going to ever be able to take pain meds because we have made it this way so that you will not get addicted. And you're going to have to learn to deal with pain through consciousness and through healing. And I was like, great, this really hurt. So, all I could take was Tylenol. And the pain was like a sword going through my back. That's the way it felt. And every step felt like swords coming back up through my body. I mean, it was intense. I couldn't even hardly sleep the first few nights. But what I learned is I could participate with the angels. So I could visualize them continuing to heal me. And I would call on them to keep working on my back. And I also could get out of body. So I thought, well, I just had a near-death experience. I wonder if I can keep traveling into those realms. And I could. And so there's a difference between lucid dreaming and out of body. I learned how to lucid dream, but in that first week, I was having a ton of out of body experiences where I just left that horrible body behind and I went and, floated around and had more experiences in a real conscious way. And sometimes I was just waiting until morning, and then I would come back to the body and try in a very slow way to work it and walk with it and participate with its healing. I broke 3 vertebrae and it was all mid back. I just had whiplash in the neck and I broke my ankle and 3 vertebrae. So they took hip from my bone. And back then in 94, they put big rods up above that hooked on to the vertebrae below. And then they rebuilt the back and they put rods along the spine and then it hooked on below. So most of my mid back is fused. And it's miraculous. I mean, it truly is miraculous because there's no reason why I had no feeling in my left leg when I went into surgery. And I have a little nerve damage, like probably I could, touch certain parts of my left leg and I don't feel it, but I can walk, I can run, I have full mobility. So it was miraculous. And I did know that the angel's light was part of that healing. My surgeon was doing cutting edge things, part the angels and part the doctors. Like the angels were assisting the surgeons, but I knew that they also did something along the spine that probably modern medicine couldn't do at that time, that it was light healing.
You mentioned that you also gained mediumship abilities.
Yeah.
How was that?
Well, immediately I could sense spirits, ghosts. I was still in touch with my grandfather since I had seen him over there. And but I thought it was just my ancestors. I thought, well, maybe everyone is connected to their own ancestors. But as I went into the teaching field, I would hear a lot of times from students' grandparents, because those were the only people that they were connected to that were young. And I would hear grandparents tell me things and angels tell me things like help this student in this way, or, he wants to be this when he grows up, or she wants to be a chef, or, just little hints about how to support the students. And that was helpful, and I didn't tell anyone because that would sound crazy back then, to mention, these intuitive gifts. And I knew that there were mediums, but my mission was to teach. So for a very long time, I kept all of these gifts kind of to myself, except for a few spiritual friends. I had a Reiki healer friend and a spiritual friend, and we'd try out Unity Church and Church of Psychic Science. And, we'd go around to, the different fairs where there are healers. And, we were engaged in, at that time, the Celestine prophecy had come out. So we'd go to, book readings about spiritual books. And I devoured everything from Moody and, all the near-death experiencers at that time in the 90s. And I felt, this is the weirdest thing. I went from being someone who knew nothing about quantum physics or, meditation, to really feeling like, I hate to say it, but kind of an expert in these areas. Like, I'd listen to gurus. I'm like, yeah, he's right. That's right. And it was just like I had this extra leg up. Now, you do have to practice these things. You can't just come back here and be lazy. I did have a meditation practice. I learned transcendental meditation. I tried Buddhist meditations. I just delved into every type of meditation there is. But what I really loved doing was having my own healing experiences with spirit, is really participating and going to certain realms, and receiving emotional healing or physical healing, or just getting out of body and doing fun things, just merging with a hawk, or, just learning from other people. So I learned from shamans. I kind of delved into this world of spirituality. And I think when you've had a big experience, like a near-death experience, it's easy to learn from other people. So there was a time of learning from others and participating with my own gifts. I'll admit, the being outside of time, or the psychic flashes, were a little disorienting. Like, those were not something I actually enjoyed. So I didn't understand the purpose of them, because a lot of times I would know what was going to happen 10 minutes from when it was going to happen. And that just seemed random, and I felt outside of time. And I was like, God, why is this happening? I don't understand it. I don't particularly like it. It's disorienting. And then I got playful with it. So if I saw, that a person, when I healed up and returned back to college, I would know what people. I was working at a pizza joint, and I would know what people were going to order before they ordered it. And it was kind of a high-end pizza joint where you could order wine and, this brick oven, type of pizza. And I'd say, oh, don't you want this instead of that? And I'd try to get them to change their order, just, because I knew what they were already going to order. And so, that type of psychic awareness, or being outside of time a little bit, bugged me. So I asked for that to stop, because it kind of felt like Groundhog Day, just like, what's going to happen before it's going to happen. And that's, I only wanted it if there was like a small accident that could be avoided. So one time I was meditating underneath this ceiling fan, and I heard get up and move, and I got up and moved, and the ceiling fan fell. And so I was like, okay, that was helpful, that time. And then I played around with, I knew what songs were on the radio before the song, like before I turned on the radio. So I'd start singing it, and then I'd turn it on, and it was right, almost like I was hearing the radio waves. So there were just weird little synchronicities like that often.
How long did it take you to understand that you had had a near-death experience? And did you know about near-death experiences before you had this?
Yeah, I'd taken a religious studies class in college, and I read The Varieties of Religious Experience by William James, and I had also heard of Raymond Moody. He was, out there, and I had known a guy in high school. I didn't go see him in the hospital, but I heard from a friend of mine, and he was a drug user and he was a wild kid. And she said when he came out of his surgery, he had this light around him, and he said, "I'm never going to hang out with you guys again." He's like, and he saw Jesus, and he's like, "I saw Jesus. I'm a different person." Like, but I wish you well and I wish you love. And she said he didn't even look the same, after the surgery. So I was aware of people who had had different experiences. And immediately I knew I'd had one of those experiences, and I knew I wasn't going to be the same. And just, I didn't feel the same. I mean, my consciousness was so different, just like vastly different. It was fun. It was overwhelming. There were times I wanted a teacher here on earth, to help me, figure this out. But I only had books and friends who were interested.
So did it take long to start sharing your experience with others, or was it hard at first?
Well, I shared it with every single group of students that I had. And, school districts might not have appreciated that, but a lot of times I worked in low income districts, and, there wasn't a lot of looking in to see what we're doing in the classrooms, but my students loved it. I felt like I was spreading awakening in some ways, because they would tell me about their ghost experiences. They would tell me that they had more comfort after hearing my story. And even to this day, I think people heal from hearing these stories. I recently talked with someone's preteen daughter who has a lot of gifts, but she also has a lot of trauma, and she was cutting herself. Well, after speaking to me about my near-death experience and receiving some healing work, she told her grandmother, "I just feel better. I can sleep now. I know I'm not crazy. I know I'm in contact with my angels and guides, and this is real." And she's, like doing a whole lot better. So I think a lot of times it's healing for people to hear these experiences. So I told a few friends, I told, family members. I asked my mom about the candy bar, and she said that my stepdad came back with a candy bar, and she and my father at that moment were certain I had died, and they were on their knees praying. And my stepdad came in with the candy bar and offered them some. And so for a split second in time, she kind of believed in my near-death experience, but her minister gave her a pamphlet about how near-death experiences, when you don't see Jesus, are from the devil, and it's a false light, and all this fear. Even the pamphlet itself was like dark and fearful, and I was like, "No, Mom, this is not right." And as time has gone on, I mean, my last conversation with my mom, she just flat out told me I'm going to hell. Like, that's her belief, like she, in a mean way, not in a loving way. And I was like, "Mom, I know I'm not." And even if I thought someone was, I wouldn't say that to someone. And I don't think that's very kind. It's, it, it's painful, but that is a belief of some very close-minded, usually evangelical Christians, that if you don't have an exact biblical experience, then it's not of God. It doesn't matter to them that my experience is multifaceted, and many years later I did feel the healing presence of Jesus. I believe Jesus was a real person who was a healer and an amazing enlightened being, who walked this earth and wants us to heal and wants us to be loved like we're children. I just don't think still, I think there's a lot maybe we don't understand about the Bible, and maybe it was written in some ways to control people or control culture at that time. So I don't know. I'm not a religious scholar, I just know that my experience was real, was healing, and it did put me on a trajectory of greater light and greater healing and greater happiness. And I have no fear of death. I know I will go to God.
Recently, there have been new technologies that have allowed resuscitation. People, more and more people are coming back from death, and there are more near-death experience stories being told. So, do you think that humankind is going through like a new era? They talk about the new age, the age of Aquarius, that we're passing from third dimension to fifth dimension. What do you think is going on?
I definitely think we have far more capabilities than we're aware of. And the minute text messaging was invented, I knew that was just thought transference, that we do this all the time with people. Normally we notice it when we either like someone immediately as a friend or like someone romantically, like there's a certain spark, you might say, or a connection that people have. And you can have that though with everyone, like you can be connected in this way consciously with others. You can, I practice with friends. We will meet each other during a lucid dream and talk, and then the next day, remember it. And it's fun to play with consciousness. There's a lot more to this than people realize. And I think, yeah, near death experiences are part of the way that consciousness is spreading. And, the 5D is already here. Like, I feel like I'm already in it, like to some degree. I feel like anyone who gets messages from their guides, feels energetic healing, works with energy, sees the world beyond this material world, is already operating in the fifth dimension, that they're here in the 3D, but they're operating with five-dimensional reality. And I think it's just, there are people still who numb themselves with drugs, alcohol, technology, overwork, just not asking the basic questions, the magic. We come into this world with a knowing of the other side. And if you transition very slowly, I'm sure, with a disease, you begin to open up and have some contact with ancestors before you leave, and some spiritual experiences that help guide you out of this body. So in the middle, people just aren't asking the right questions a lot of times. What can we do? How can we open up more? What is possible? What kind of spiritual healing and emotional healing and physical healing is possible through this energy realm? So yeah, people are waking up in mass. And after 2020, I saw a whole group of students, for a variety of reasons. I've kind of pulled them. So college students during the pandemic learned to meditate. They had all this time on their hands. So they got curious. Some of them wanted to lucid dream, and some of them just asked those deep questions about life and death. And some of them faced death of family members, and this changed them. So young people have woken up in mass. Like, it is like speaking to the choir now. Like, I just see a huge change. Not every student, but I'd say like 80% of college students have an awareness of spirituality and out of body experiences. And the other thing, a lot of students, like, this is kind of funny, but I'm not a fan of using drugs for just for fun and coupling psilocybin with alcohol and weed and all that. But some people tried just psilocybin and had very interesting experiences where they opened up to this idea of energy beyond this realm. So a lot of students tried mushrooms for the first time and believe in a different way of interacting with reality. So yeah, people are waking up in mass, and then you see different treatments for PTSD and depression, treatments like ketamine and other types of really intense experiences.
So where do you think this is all leading, and what would be your final message? for the viewers?
Oh, I think some people are waking up the hard way, and it's challenging for them. I think ultimately, it takes time for things to filter through the 3D realm, and we may not see changes immediately, but keep focusing on the light and the changes you want to create and you want to see in this world. I just interviewed a woman you might want to interview. She's very interesting, Alyssa Rushton, and her analogy was race car drivers know not to look at the wall or they're going to crash into it. So look into where you want to go, that we are manifesting a different reality, but you have to be positive and look towards what you want to create, not all the destruction that is happening around us. And everyone's afraid of change, but we can make this change a lot more gentle and a lot more beautiful and really sacred. And as we connect more with our divinity and our sacred nature, we're going to make the dying process more beautiful. We're going to come into better balance with nature. We're going to be in better balance with one another. And ultimately, it's very simple. People heal through unconditional love. So you may not be, like I tell individual people, you don't have to go out and unconditionally love everyone, but love who you can unconditionally, and believe that, if you don't want to work with a certain population of people, maybe someone else can, and they can offer unconditional healing to, say, prisoners or, people who have committed crimes, that the prison systems can become more loving, that school systems can be more supportive of the creativity and spirituality of students, that all of life can be a whole lot better than it is, and that we are evolving and we are moving toward that with love.
You've been featured by National Geographic. You've been on the GAIA channel, Dr. Oz show, and you're doing a great work. But how can people contact you if they want, and what do you offer to people?
Well, I love to work with people with Theta Healing. This is something I've learned recently. When I came back to the body, I knew that the body held like programs from my ancestors. It held emotional wounds from this life. I knew that trauma was stored in the body, and there's lots of great modalities, EMDR therapy, all of these are wonderful, but Theta Healing is a form of energy healing, which is a little bit different. So it's like the icing on the cake. Sometimes people just like finally experience big core breakthroughs with this modality. So I love to do Theta Healing. I love to meet people in a meditation group that I have, and I love to do medium readings and angelic guidance readings. So it's always a pleasure to meet people and contact with them.
How can people contact you?
My website, Tricia, Tricia, Barker, Barker, NDE.com. So near death experience. And I have a calendar, and just email me, contact me. Would love to hear from you.
Well, thank you, Tricia. This was amazing.
I hope I see you at IANS, because I really think I felt like I knew you already, which is cool. You're out here doing good work.
This has been the A.J. Parr Spiritual Journalist Podcast. Please like, share, and subscribe.